All right, Algebra 1 students, I forgot to record the lesson 87. I will do it on my own without you guys there and record it and post it so you can look at it later to learn. All right, here we go. All right, so we started our lesson on page 570, and it's talking about four terms, and they're different, and factoring them in such a way that we can do two binomials times each other. And so what we do is we have a group like this, and we factor something out of that group, which is what we did here. We factored this 5x out of that group, and what was left was an x plus 2y. And then in this group, we factored out this 3, and we ended up with an x plus 2y. And if you'll notice, these are exactly the same. So now I can say 5x plus 3, put that there, times my x plus 2y. And that's one way of taking four terms and being able to factor them in such a way that you can get two binomials times each other. Sometimes, however, you need to do some rearranging. Like I needed to stick these two together so that I could factor them, which is what I did here. And then these two I left right here. And so now I can factor a 5 out of these two, and I get an x squared plus 1. And then out of these two, I'd factor out a negative 12x squared, and I get an x squared plus 1. Notice that's the same. And so now I have a 5x minus 12, which is this one and this one, and then my x squared, that looks like a 7, but that's supposed to be a 2, an x squared plus 1. All right. Whoops, I shifted gears. I want to be back over here. All right. Now this next one, what you have to be able to do is factor out a common factor out of all four of these terms. So you have to be able to watch that first. And so when I look at all four of these terms, I say to myself, can I factor something out of all of them first? Well, yeah, we realize we can factor out a 2z squared. And so when I do that, I end up with four terms. I end up with a 27z or xz plus a 3x. And automatically I realize I can factor a 3x out of that. And I end up with my 9z plus 1. All right. And then out of here, I notice here, look at this. This is a 9z plus a negative 9z minus 1. That's really close to this one right here. And so I said, if I could just factor out a negative 1, well, then it turns out to be exactly what I want it to be. And so I end up with my 3x minus 1, which is this term and this term, and I put it right there. I get my 9z plus 1, which is here and here, and I have that right there, and I can't forget my 2z squared, which I put on the back end here, but I could put it in the front. All right. So that one's a little trickier because you have to factor out something out of all four terms first. Now this next one, again, I need to regroup. So I have this term, and I want to group it up with this term so that I can have an easier time factoring. And that's what I did when I put these two together. All right. And then what's left is my negative 3xy and my plus 30, which is from here and here. So here I factor out a 5x, I get this, and what I have left is an xy minus 10. And I factor out a negative 3 here, and I get, lo and behold, an xy minus 10. So it's pretty obvious that what I need to do now here is put together my 5x and my minus 3 right here, and then my xy minus 10 is right here, and I've got two binomials times each other. Now, this next part is kind of tricky, and it's a way to factor when you have a trinomial and you're trying to factor it, and it's just getting too weird because I have such a big coefficient in front of the k squared. And so the trick is to take the first term, the a term, and multiply it times the c term, and I get 60. And then I have to think to myself, what two numbers, when I multiply them, give me that 60, but when I subtract them, they give me a negative 17. And we decided on these two numbers. Okay, I multiply them, I get a positive 60, but when I subtract them, I get a negative 17. So what I did is I take this negative 17 and split it up into a negative 5 and a negative 12, and I end up with a minus 5k and a minus 12k. And once I do that, I can factor it the way I've been just showing you how to do. All right. I'm going to factor a k out of these two terms. All right. So I get a k times 6k minus 5. And then I'm going to factor out a 2 out of these two terms, a negative 2 right here. And then I get 6k minus 5. And so now I get my two binomials, k minus 2 from here and here, and my 6k minus 5 from these two things right here. All right. Now, Daniel asked me about B, and wanted me to help him with B with the practice problem. And this is another one of those where it gets kind of tricky, all right? Just because of what's right in here, all right? What's right in here. And we'll talk about that. So here, I'm going to factor a y squared. And what's left is a 3y minus 4, 3 minus 4y. But that's exactly what I have right here. Wait a second, what do I do? Well, what's not so obvious is if I factor out a positive 1, I still get my 3 minus 4y. And now I can say y squared plus 1. And then my 3 minus 4y right there. Now it's kind of a little tricky, I have to remember. He also wanted me to help him with the next problem. Okay. I can't remember which practice problem this was, but he wanted me to help me with this one. And again, if I'm going to take these two, I think we rearranged something. If I'm going to take this, yeah, I rearranged it in one of the practice problems that you have to do on the assignment. I rearranged it so I had these two terms first. Factor out a 3a, and I get b minus 5. And then here, I'm going to factor out a negative 4, and I get an ab minus 5, because a negative times a negative gives me that positive 20. And then I can put them together. And if I put them together, I change my writing tool here. And if I put them together, I get 3a minus 4 times ab minus 5. All right. All right. Let's look at the next one. This was another one that was tricky. Okay. This is one of those ones with 3 terms. And remember, I have to use the A term and the C term, multiply them, and that's how I get the 90. And then I have to ask myself, what 2 numbers, when I multiply them, give me this 90, but when I add them, it gives me this -1 right here. And we realized it was going to be a -9 and a +10. So that's how we went from this to this. All right. So instead of a -1a, I put a -10a plus a +9a, split them apart. So now I have 4 terms, and now I can factor something. I can factor a 2a. Let's change the color. Okay. I can factor a 2a out of these 2 terms, and so I end up with a 2a, and that leaves me at 3a minus 5. And then out of these 2 terms, I can factor out a 3, and I end up with 3a minus 5. My handwriting's not too good there, but that's how I end up getting the 2a plus 3 right here, and the 3a minus 5 right here. All right. So I'm going to stop recording. That's my lesson. I hope this proves helpful to you. Okay? Have a wonderful time.